Well, everybody. It has been another week. Um, First off, I'm probably going to do book haul second, actually, or I forget because I have a tendency to forget books I get. Just don't get that often anymore. But the actual first thing I want to say is that I'm actually giving a presentation today for Halford's Hall. I'm going to give a presentation on the word Viking. I'm mostly going to be looking at the Old English attestations of the cognate to Viking, Viking, in Old English. And yeah, come and support me. I'm a bit nervous. It's more academic. I've given presentations now. I've recorded stuff on YouTube for a while now. I'm pretty comfortable doing that, and then I've done some presentations in person now. This is a presentation online with a crowd I'm not all that familiar with. So yeah, and pretty strictly channel. But we'll see about that for sure. So I if you just message me on like Discord at Hemvar, HEMVAR, or email me or something, I can probably send you the Zoom link for that. That is like 7 p.m. Eastern time though, 4 p.m. Pacific in the United States. So, yeah. But anyways, um, anyhow, but yeah, again, you could probably just catch it here in a couple weeks, maybe, or something like that. Anyways, so I did get some books this week. I got History of the Kings of Britain by Geoffrey Monmouth. If you remember last week, I got another book by Monmouth. It was one I actually haven't read. I haven't had a copy of. And then same with the Lays of Marie de France. Same thing, pretty much. I just haven't had a copy, so I've remedied that. Then same with Wace's Brute. Um, I still need to get Lachenmann's Brute, but it is much more expensive. It is not as popular as Oasis, for example, or as either of these are. So, pretty much, if you want to get it, then you can get. There is a book that has the Arthurian sections, but I want the whole thing. And to get the whole thing, you pretty much just got to get the Early English Text Society, and there's 2 volumes. They're about 45 pounds each, and I'm broke, so see if I ever get that. And then I also got this copy of Mary Flowers Broswell's Sir Percival Gowes and Owain and Gowan. Um, these are the actual, just this original Middle English text. It's not a translation. Middle English is pretty easy to read. I recommend. Um, and I wanted to read. Well, I want to read both of these actually, but I got it specifically right now for my Percival reading. And I did start this one actually, so I got a little bit. I'm not very far though. I'm about line 600. It's not a very long poem though. It's a little over 2,000 lines. So, um, yeah, hopefully I'll finish this one this week. It just depends on how much time I can dedicate to it. Reading Middle English is not quite like reading Modern English. It takes a little bit more focus and effort, but it's not that difficult. Another book I have been reading this week is Perilous Vows. Again, I'm not that far. So, okay, there you go. So that is also another Percival thing. But as far as like the books and stuff I finished this week, so I did finish Daughter of the Drow by Elaine Cunningham. I enjoyed it. It's nice to finally get back into this one, and I pretty much have already shared like my like vague thoughts that I think Cunningham does a pretty good job with the Drow and handling them and giving them nuance and making it more interesting. So I appreciate that a lot. And she's just a good writer, anyways. I also finished Merlin by Stephen R. Lawhead. And I'm almost done with Arthur, so I'll mention that now too. Almost done with Arthur. I'm pretty close to finishing Arthur, so I can pretty much tell you that of the 3 I've read so far, I'm not quite done with Arthur, but I doubt this will change. Taliesin's my favorite, and then Merlin, and then Arthur. So they actually just get worse, I guess. They're not bad. They're not really bad. I like Merlin a lot. There's some pretty gruesome parts. You get some emotion out of me, but it's good. And then I also finished Enemy of God by Bernard Cornwell. An absolutely cartoony novel. I have to be completely honest. I wasn't the biggest fan of The Winter King, but it wasn't bad. Um, but Enemy of God is just like so cheesily bad. It's obnoxious. So mainly the problem is okay because I will say this too. I have started Excalibur, which is the third book in that trilogy, and I'm enjoying this one more. Um, the first book, it's really focusing on Arthur fighting against other British people, right, and the Britons, and kind of getting more of a unity out of that. And the second one is pagans versus Christians, which is insanely silly. I mean, what the way it's handled is like ridiculous. It's ahistorical. It's not historically accurate, and so it's just misleading. I feel like in some ways, but the idea of druids at the time too is a little bit historically inaccurate as well. It is a little bit more fuzzy. I think the druids are pretty much suppressed by the Romans, right? Like you can see the siege of Anglesey in the first century, so hundreds of years before this stuff takes place, and then yeah, they pretty much fall out of the records in the second century. Uh, so maybe they were around in Ireland, I guess. But then at this point, also the Irish are converted, so they're not around. And then the Britons are largely converted at this point. They're not quite completely converted, but I mean, the Romans pretty much were, right? Because the Romano-British, the Romans were Christians by the end of the empire. So this whole very anti-Christian bend is like really just funny, and it was annoying because it doesn't make any sense. It was annoying in book one. It's impossible to ignore in book two, which is why I feel like book two is probably going to be the worst one in this trilogy. The third book is focusing much more on the Saxons and the Saxon conflict, and it's going well. I'm liking Excalibur. They're just uh, I think if you took out this, like, Cornwell obviously has like a bone to pick with Christianity. If you took that out, or even if he just handled it better, right? Because like it's I'm okay with the author having a bone to pick with Christianity. It's the fact that he's writing about something that is so obviously Christian, and then he just tries to make it not, right? And like all the Christians are like cartoon villains, and I don't think it's just from Derville being a pagan himself, right, and having like this perspective of the Christians suck. No, the Christians are terrible, even if it was in third person, right? Like it wouldn't just it's not just Derville's perspective. These Christians are bad, right? They're villains. They're contemptible, right? And Cornwell is just it's like so overt. It's a little silly. I think most people probably don't care. Um, a lot of people, well, a lot of society is not super Christian right now, but I think it's really cringe. I feel like actually it compares really well to two other book series I'm reading right now that are Arthurian. The Pendragon cycle is Christian. It's more historically accurate in that sense, where these characters are Christian. They're not really at the beginning because Taliesin takes place pretty early. Um, but then as time goes on, as we get to the actual Arthurian stuff, pretty much everyone's Christian, right? And it makes sense. Now, the thing with Lawhead is that he comes off as very preachy in a sense. He's not like overly so, I'd say, but like it seems very obvious that that is part of his agenda, actually, that he is Christian and he wants you to know that it's actually a cool thing, right? Like Merlin has the power of Christ on his side, right? It's not just magic or whatever, you know. So I mean, like, and so he's kind of the opposite of Cornwell. That he is a bit more historically accurate, but he's also just like overtly Christian, and he like obviously you can see it as a positive thing from Lawhead's perspective. And then the fourth book I finished this week was The Retreat to Avalon by Sean Poge. Page. I don't know how to say this author's name. I apologize, Sean. Um, well, she's gonna say it's Shane or something. Anyways, no. And um, in the Retreat to Avalon, it is more historically accurate, like in the Pendragon cycle by Lawhead, um, which is to say there are some pagans. Most of the people are Christians at this point, um, and but it's not preachy, right? The author doesn't seem to have a problem with Christianity, or if he does, it's really not coming through. And he really doesn't seem like he really likes Christianity, right? Or if he does, it's not coming through. So it takes a very neutral middle road. So, anyways, that's like just a kind of off topic, but not really. I've been reading a lot of Arthuriana. Um, I think if Cornwell didn't have that stuff in there, it'd still be really edgy books. They're really edgy and they're really silly. In that sense, that regard. A lot of people still like that stuff. I've kind of growing sick of it um, over the years of reading stuff like that. Um, but they're not bad. They're really not bad. They are still entertaining. Retreat to Avalon is interesting. It is a very interesting take on Arthuriana that I was not really all that familiar with before reading. The idea is actually from Jeffrey Ash, I think is his name, his historian. It it pretty much proposes this idea that there's this guy in Roman sources called the Rio Thomas, um, which would probably be Rigotamos in Britannic, and that this is actually a historical person. That this is Arthur, essentially, right? And what is he? Well, he doesn't actually have this campaign in England, or well, in Britain rather. He has a campaign in Gaul. He goes to like Brittany and Gaul, and that Avalon is literally Avallon. Avalon, I think it's Avalon. Still, actually, the double L's confuse me in French. It's Avalon, right? Avalon, spelled like Avalon, pretty much, just two L's. Right, which is something I never heard before. I don't know how much I believe that. But I don't know, a mid fifth century Arthur. I always like the idea of a sixth century Arthur more, though most go with fifth century. Uh, so, anyways, um, I'm forgetting where I had my books series. Anyways, so it is an interesting book. I think it does a lot really well. I don't think the ending is. I didn't find it super satisfying. But I think it does a lot really well still, and I enjoyed it. I did technically actually start the sequel to this one, The Strife of Camlan. Uh, I'm like one chapter in, so there's nothing really to say there. Besides that, all the books I mentioned already. The other one I'm talking too long now. The other one I'm pretty far into now is Ghost King by David Gemmell. It's been a while since I read a Gemmell. It's funny. I really liked Legend, and every book I've read since, though, I kind of find them kind of like too simple, almost like kind of juvenile. Like I think he has like some really neat ways at like coming off very simple, but sometimes that simple is really close to being like too simple and just not working very well. I'm not done with Ghost King. We'll see what I think of it by the end, but it's very different, but it's still Arthuriana. So, um, anyways, let me know what you're reading. I will catch you next time.